Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian McCollum, and today we are taking a look at a really cool intersection of military and competition hardware. We're also looking at what is essentially the only Delta Force small arm ever to have actually been openly sold on the civilian market. This is one of the STI 40 caliber 2011 pistols that was actually purchased and used by Delta Force in the early 2000s. So, just to set the stage a little bit, there is, interestingly, a notion out there that firearms competition is wholly removed and irrelevant to military firearms technology. And I think the truth is very much the opposite. There have been a lot of instances where competitive shooting techniques and equipment have blended over into military use, both effectively and ineffectively. So on the one hand, you have things like the 1903 Springfield rear sight, which was born of high-power rifle competitive shooting, which was not well adapted to the military battlefield. But then there are also plenty of instances where things came out of competition shooting that were excellent, and we're actually seeing that right now with low-power variable optics on rifles. At any rate, this is another of those situations. So in the early 2000s, I think we're talking, these were acquired, I believe, in 2006, 2007. Delta Force was looking to replace its 1911 pistols with something that had more magazine capacity. They were, of course, using standard single-stack 1911s, and while they liked the 45 cartridge, they wanted something with more ammo. These are handguns. They're not particularly terminally effective regardless, and having more ammunition is a really good thing. This was, however, kind of before 9mm gained widespread acceptance and popularity among the special operations community. They still wanted, they really liked the 45, that would have been cool, but they were also looking at the really successful competition shooters of the day in disciplines like USPSA, IPSC. And those guys were generally shooting major caliber cartridges. 40 Smith & Wesson was very popular at this time. The idea of 40, of course, was, in theory, you're going to get the capacity of 9mm with the power of 45. That appeals to competition shooters, also in disciplines that have specific rules that encourage larger than 9mm projectiles. It also, of course, appeals to the military, specifically the special operations guys who have a lot of leeway in choosing their own firearms. And so Delta decided to adopt a 40 Smith & Wesson caliber pistol, and they tested a whole bunch. They actually looked at a bunch of 1911 or 2011, which is a double stack 1911 style pistols. They looked at Para-Ordnance, they looked at Caspian. What they ended up adopting or purchasing for real evaluation were two. One of them was the STI 2011, and one of them was the Glock 22. Now, let's take a closer look at this, and then I'll explain why this didn't stay in service and why these were instead sold on the civilian market. These are, generally speaking, pretty standard STI 40 caliber guns. We have a number of features on them that were enhanced over a typical 1911. They have a 5-inch barrel that uses a cone profile to it instead of having a separate barrel bushing like a traditional 1911. They, of course, also have rails for lights on the bottom of the frame. We have a number of markings here. So STI, which, of course, was located in Texas. 2011 is the model number, and then we have a couple different things here. SAS 9292 is the serial number of this particular gun. 161 is the Delta Force rack number, and I've seen 2-digit examples as well, so not sure on the exact quantity of these, not sure exactly how they were rack marked, if these rack numbers include other guns as well, or how exactly that worked. You'll find some marked NW and some LW, and that was from STI. That stands for no warranty or limited warranty. And on the opposite side here, they're STI Tactical, and they have a US marking on the slide as well. The official legal manufacturer's mark has to be on the frame, so it's down here on the bottom, STI International out of Georgetown, Texas. They came with ambidextrous manual safeties, of course, nice beaver tail, commander style of bobbed hammer. The sights are OEM Bomar sights, which are adjustable for windage and elevation, and they have a pair of tritium inserts in the back. The front sight is, of course, also has a tritium vial in it. So these are luminous night sights. Now, of course, the thing that makes a 2011 preferable to a 1911 is the increased magazine capacity. So you've got a big old double stack sized magazine well there. And STI supplied these with two different lengths of magazines. This is a 140 millimeter magazine, and these designations or these specifications were done for competitive shooting based on magazine length stipulations in the various competition organizations. So the 140 millimeter magazine in 40 Smith & Wesson held 17 rounds. They also supplied it with a 170 millimeter magazine, which held 22 rounds. And it is truly the magazine that was the weak point in this pistol. Now, there were some reliability issues, there were some durability issues that Delta found with these pistols, but the real problem for them was the mag. So this is a frame that is still sized to fit 45 ACP, and 45 is a longer cartridge than 40 Smith & Wesson. And so the magazine is the length essentially of a 45 ACP magazine. And when we look at the ammunition that Delta wanted to use, and this is an example of it, you can see that there's a lot of free space for the round to slide back and forth here. Now, the reason in competition, what guys would do is load longer ammunition to fit the full length of the magazine, and that would solve the reliability issues. Delta couldn't do that because they were also using Glock 22s, and the Glock has a much shorter magazine. So this is a 9mm Glock mag, but the 9 and 41s are the same body size. You can see there to some extent that it's a little shorter, but it's exaggerated by the fact that this is a polymer magazine, and so the magazine body here is thicker than the thin sheet metal STI mag. And if I put this round into the Glock magazine, you can see that it fully fits the length of the Glock mag. So any ammunition you wanted to run in the Glocks was kind of by definition going to be too short to run reliably in the STIs. And someone like Delta Force is not going to be supplying themselves with two separate loadings of 40 cal ammo that weren't interchangeable between the different duty pistols that they were experimenting with. And so it was largely for this reason that the STIs got rejected by Delta. It's also worth pointing out that it is the competition heritage of these pistols that is why this magazine extends sort of weirdly like this below the grip frame. The major competitions at the time allowed a maximum of 140 millimeters for the magazine length, and for that no one was going to deliberately get a shorter magazine and put themselves at a disadvantage. So this is the standard competition length magazine, and STI wasn't going to try and make all custom new magazines for a small order of guns from Delta, so they supplied them with the standard competition magazines from the day. Now, in STI's defense, obviously this was not the reception that they were hoping for from their high-end competition guns. Today, STI has undergone a change of ownership and a redesign of their pistols, and they've addressed issues like, very specifically, in fact, first and foremost, that new ownership addressed the problems with magazines. And they were so interested in making sure that this was that it was well understood that the company had changed, that the designs had changed, and these issues had been addressed, that they went ahead and renamed the company Staccato, which is where you will find STI today, under the name Staccato. Anyway, in light of primarily their magazine problems, Delta ended up basically rejecting the STIs. They had purchased them, but they ended up sending them back to STI and asking for their money back because, well, they just weren't going to be reliable enough. They weren't going to be combat effective because of those magazine issues above everything else. Now, when these guns came back to STI, of course, this isn't the greatest publicity for STI. It's one thing to be able to say our pistols have been adopted by Delta Force. It's not quite the same thing to say these pistols were used by Delta Force and then they sent them back to us because they didn't like them. So STI sold these guns as used 40 caliber 2011s without making any light of their Delta provenance. And so they kind of, some of them got out on the market to people who knew what they were, people who had connections at STI and understood what was happening. Some of them just got out there with people who happened to be shopping STI's website and went, oh, that's a cheap 40 caliber. Like, that's cheaper than I could buy one brand new. Looks great, I'll buy it. And so some of these are probably still out there with people who don't recognize that they have, in many ways, an extremely desirable U.S. military provenance firearm. So really cool to be able to get a chance to take a look at this one. They are excellent firearms as long as you're using ammunition that is suitable for their magazines, which is to say generally longer loaded ammunition, and with a recognition that these are competition pistols and their magazines require attention. So understandable that this is something that Delta Force wouldn't want to continue using. They instead went with the Glock 22s, and they were very happy with those. So, a big thanks to the viewer who loaned this to me. It's very cool to get a chance to take a look at. Total quantity of these, I should say, I don't have an exact number. Kevin over at Weapons Man said 60. He didn't cite a source for that number, and he is unfortunately now deceased, so we can't ask him. But that's the one estimated number that I've seen. So hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching.